So she's really saying, look, instead of comparing yourself to the previous generation and say we have a little bit harder than they do, begin to look at, ways of life, lifestyles that have worked for hundreds or thousands of years for people that had it a lot worse than you. I think that's a much better question to ask than just throwing up your hands and saying, life sucks because things are worse than my parents or my grandparents had it. I don't know what your thoughts are there, but what have you heard from like your generation when they think about this economic problem? And what do you think is a really, what are the ways in which like this can be framed that you find helpful or less helpful?
Yeah, I definitely do find it interesting how the things that I see are like people my age going on TikTok and explain and complaining about this, how I work 50 hours a week and I can barely afford for myself. And I'm like, they're and they usually do it from their car. So I'm like, okay, you have a car. They're doing it on their phone. Okay, you have a phone. So it's kind of funny that like we are in some ways living in luxury, but we're still unable to provide for ourselves adequately. So I feel like there is clearly like some kind of disconnect here. And I think part of it is the government pushing certain agendas and fooling a whole generation of people into falling into their hands and needing the government constantly and going to college and getting degrees that they're never going to use and things like that. So I think that that is part of the problem. Yeah, and I think she does make a good point of or you make a good point of, let's look at what people did to succeed in a time that was much worse than our time, and it is clear that, relying on community or relying on the older generations to help out was a big thing, and I think that there needs to be more of that, honestly, because I think that too many people in my generation have been raised to be independent, and that working together with the way that the economy is declining has just made this perfect storm of people like me, people my age, just not doing well in their life. And of course, if you're not doing well economically, then that would probably lead to not doing well mentally or emotionally. And so then that creates a whole other slew of problems. And so I think there has to be a generational crossover somewhere. Like they need help from the older generations. And it the unwillingness of the older generations to help out is part of what's causing this, I think.
Yeah.
So I think that if there is more of that, if we didn't feel we meaning Gen Z, if we didn't feel so alone in this, then I think that we'd have a lot more of a leg up.
Yeah.
And so I'm very grateful that you have such a finger on the pulse of like our economy and things like that, and how you've encouraged us to go different routes than what's normal, what's status quo. And that had led to a lot more thriving in regards to finances and emotion and mental health. So, yeah, I'm very grateful for that. But I think that that just has to become a norm, like the parents helping out, the grandparents helping out.
That's right.
And I think that would change everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is the real key, kind of to bring these two conversations together because your generation is living after the government has stepped in and engineered a society in which you don't need family. And there was a huge surge of wealth during that period, and the government sort of filled in all the gaps. And when we start to enter into another season where we're not thriving as much economically and you might need your family, well, those bonds have been destroyed and they've
Yeah.
been destroyed culturally. In other words, people don't even, whatever created them, it's not just within your own family, it's with all the families you know. So you can't even imagine what that could look like. And so nobody has those expectations, nobody has that memory. And so you're just like floundering because the safety net was what destroyed basically you used to have this family safety net that got destroyed by the government safety net. And once the government safety net goes away, it's not like you just, okay, here comes back the family safety net. There's going to be a generation or two that's going to really suffer because they're just going to hit the ground. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. And my statement, my kind of challenge to the way this has happened is like, why did we ever give up the family? Like that was never a good idea. That was never a good exchange. That was always a temporary fix. Even when we were thriving economically, had more money than almost any society in human history, and we had this thriving middle class, we were still going into debt. In other words, we were still borrowing from future generations just to even live that lifestyle. Now we're borrowing at a rate that is so ridiculously unsustainable that it's going to backfire on a generation that it's going to create a economic crisis like we've never seen once that bubble bursts. And this is why we have to stop. And this is not a statement governmentally, because I don't think government will ever stop spending money or trying to issue programs or trying to buy votes. But what we can do is we need to be sounding the alarm and saying, look, build strong families, build strong generational bonds between generations, and help each other, and create a village structure so that you can have children and thrive during these times of crisis that are coming. And by the way, this is just the way everyone's always lived in the past. It's not some kind of huge tragedy, but it can become a tragedy if you attempt to continue to like lean into these negative patterns, to say, yeah, we're gonna try to make a go of it in a hyper urbanized environment, and we're going to live in a way that is really hard on our family and unsustainable for our future children. That is a problem. So we have to think about this stuff a little bit more deeply.